Hi, World History. This is Miss Corey. Welcome to U14-L3 Basics of World War I, Part 2. Your job, you're going to watch this ed puzzle and answer the questions. Questions I'll ask you during the video today will be in blue text that I want you to answer directly on the ed puzzle. And of course, if you have any questions, do let your teacher know. We are here to help you. Learning targets, examine conflicting narratives about the past and identify how these narratives can lead to global conflict. All right, so last time, World War I, we talked about that there were two fronts of World War I. We had the Eastern Front, which is Germany and Austria-Hungary and their border with Russia. And then the Western Front, which is Germany and Austria-Hungary, border with France and Italy. All right, so let's zoom in a little bit more. Let's take a look at this map here. So we have Germany and Austria-Hungary. They are fighting against Russia on the Eastern Front, as you can see right here. Western Front, we have France and Italy. So Germany and Austria-Hungary are pretty dang busy. They got a lot of fighting to do. So again, here are the sides of World War I in 1915. We have the Allies, which are the Great Britain, Russia, France, Italy, Japan, and Serbia. And then the Central Powers, which are Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. And again, the U.S. has not even entered the war quite yet. All right, first, let's talk about the Western Front. So the Western Front had something called the Schlieffen Plan. This plan was made by the German general Alfred Graf von Schlieffen. He had two parts of the plan. Part number one is the Central Powers would first fight France. Part two is that once France is defeated, to go over and fight the Russian front. So, why did he want to attack France first? It is because Russia had a lack of a railroad system. So Germany thought that they'd have time to beat France before Russia gets supplies and troops ready via the railroad. All right, so one of the major battles during World War I on the Western Front was called the Battle of the Marne River. So as you can see here, the Marne River is right here. On September 1914, Central Powers are in the outskirts of Paris, France. So Paris is right here, so like right on the Marne River. If Paris falls, France loses. On September 5th, Allies regroup and beat the Central Powers north of Paris on the Marne River. Allies need more soldiers, though, in order to fight back the Germans, to push them back into Germany. So, 600 taxicabs from Paris drove to the Marne River with soldiers. So think of that. All of a sudden you see just lines and lines and lines of these taxis just filled with soldiers driving to the Marne River. It only provided about 5,000 more soldiers because, of course, these cars can't really hold that many people compared to the million soldiers that were already on the battlefield. But it's just kind of a really known thing because it's so kind of funny in a sense that these soldiers came over by taxicab. So the Allies were successful at the Marne River, and the Central Powers did retreat. All right, so the Battle of the Marne River was the first major battle of World War I. It was also one of the most important battles. It is because it proved that the Schlieffen Plan failed. Because once the Battle of the Marne River was done, Russia had gathered their troops and supplies over on the Eastern Front, and they were ready for war. The Central Powers would now have to fight on two fronts, both the east as well as the west. Then we have trench warfare. So trench warfare is where both sides would dig narrow trenches / walkways in the ground. It was to protect themselves from enemy fire. So both sides had trenches. That meant that they couldn't really move forward very quickly without digging more trenches. Also, it protected from artillery, so you really couldn't slaughter the enemy as easily, which means you can't move forward to victory. So it was a very, very slow war strategy. It also had awful living conditions. There was nowhere to sleep. Mud was on everyone and everything, including your food. There were a ton of rats. When it rained, it flooded. And if artillery did get into the trenches, the soldiers were trapped, and that meant pretty much an instant death for them. All right, so here's a quick video about trench warfare during World War I. All right, so from that video, tell me two differences between the Central Power or German trenches and the Allies' trenches. Yeah, the Germans definitely had the better trenches. All right, so trench warfare was slow. In February 1916, Germans launched an attack on a French trench. 300,000 soldiers died on each side. In July of 1916, Great Britain attacks a German trench. 20,000 Great Britain soldiers were killed. In November of 1916, Allies and Central Powers had lost 500,000 soldiers to trench warfare. By November of 1916, 500,000 soldiers were dead. The Central Powers gained 4 miles of land in 9 months. The Allies gained 5 miles of land in 9 months. Think of that for a second. 500,000 soldiers are dead from both sides. And there's only a gain of 4 miles in one direction and 5 miles in the other. Wow, that is a heavy toll. There's also new weapons during this time, one of them being poisonous gases, such as mustard gas. It is considered now a weapon of mass destruction. It is yellow in color, and it has a strong odor, kind of smells like garlic, hence why it's kind of called like mustard gas because of the color as well as the odor. It causes blindness, severe blisters, and also just simply choke you to death. Here is an image of World War I soldiers after they were attacked with mustard gas. So mustard gas is very irritating to the eyes. So these soldiers will never be able to see again. Their eyesight is completely gone. To get off the battlefield, they had to hold onto each other's shoulders because they can't see to walk anymore. Here is another image of mustard gas. As you can see here, these soldiers do have gas masks on. Also, we had machine guns, which you can learn more about when we talk about our World War I technology video choice. So machine guns have been around since about the 1870s. They were improved during this time to be a lot lighter, some of them not even being on wheels anymore. They would fire more rounds per second, and also they could wipe out waves of attackers. Tanks. You can also learn more about tanks during the video choice as well. They're armored combat vehicles. They moved on chain tracks like you can see here, and they were first made by the British. And submarines. So they were first made for war by the Germans in 1914. They could fire underwater missiles called torpedoes to sink battleships and also cargo ships. All right, now let's switch over to the Eastern Front. So the Eastern Front is the side with Germany. So on the German, Austria-Hungary border with Russia, there is less trench warfare during this front, but Russia is really, really struggling. So, unlike the rest of Europe, Russia is not industrialized. They lack railroads, they had no national supply of foods, weapons, clothes, boots, or blankets. Most Russian supplies came from France and England, but that was tricky too, because to send supplies to Russia, they needed to go through the North Sea, and a lot of German submarines were stationed there, and those German submarines would torpedo any supply ships that were coming through. Russia did have one advantage though, and that was population. Russia had a population of 125 million people, compared to Germany's only 68 million. Russia lost more soldiers, but they also had about twice as many soldiers to begin with. Russia ends up beating the Central Powers due to just sheer numbers and also the cold Russian winters. Now here comes the United States. All right, so America joins, but why does America join? They're not even part of Europe. Let's talk about that. So, unrestricted submarine warfare. In January of 1917, the Central Powers, including Germany, announced it would sink any ship going to Britain without warning. using its U-boats, which are a type of submarine. America had been selling weapons to the Allies. America didn't want to get into the war, but they wanted to support the Allies. On May 7th, 1915, British passenger ship the Lithuania was sailing around Britain, secretly carrying supplies for the Allies. German U-boats end up sinking the Lithuania because there was a leak that there were supplies for the Allies, which was true. There were supplies for the Allies on there. But there was also innocent passengers. 1,198 passengers died. 128 of them were U.S. citizens. President Woodrow Wilson was very angry at Germany. He demanded Germany to stop sinking ships with U.S. passengers since the U.S. was neutral, although they really weren't because they were sending supplies to the Allies. But anyway, Germany agrees after it sank 2 more passenger ships. Then Germany was like, nah, just kidding. I'm going to go sink some more ships, and ends up sinking 3 American supply ships on their way to Great Britain. In February of 1917, Germany sends a letter to the Mexican president called the Zimmermann Letter. It is named after Arthur Zimmermann, who was Germany's foreign secretary, who wrote it. In this letter, Germany tells Mexico, join us and attack the U.S. We will help you get back land the U.S. stole from you. Because the U.S. had stolen land from Mexico back during the Mexican-American War in the mid-1800s, which was true. The U.S. did illegally steal land from Mexico, but the U.S. intercepts this letter before it ever gets to the Mexican government's desk. President Woodrow Wilson and U.S. Congress declare war on the Central Powers on April 2nd, 1917. So now the U.S. joins the Allies. So we have Great Britain, Russia, France, Serbia, Japan, Italy, and the U.S. under the Allies. And then we still have Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria in the Central Powers. Rationing. Rationing is when all countries on short supply of goods, especially food. So men are out fighting, not farming, and they need food to feed the soldiers. The government then controls how much and or what kind of food civilians get. We also have propaganda. This is a one-sided information designed to persuade the public to keep morale and or support for the war. So, for example, Uncle Sam is a huge, huge cartoon figure during World War I. So here are some examples of American propaganda for the war. So this one says fight or buy bonds. The third, Liberty loans. So here's a lady, she has like this kind of like almost Greek-looking dress, and she has the flags, and you see the guys fighting in the back. Hold up your end. So you're supposed to like feel like you need to like reach out and take the other end of like the cot to help out this nurse with the war effort as there's a bomb exploding behind her. Save the wheat and help the fleet eat less bread. So telling civilians to save their food for the soldiers who are fighting. This one, we have the Statue of Liberty saying you buy a Liberty bond. Will you have a part in victory? So here's a lady, she's planting a garden to help feed her and her family. She also is draped with the American flag. All right, let's wrap this up. Today we talked about the Western Front, the Eastern Front, the Schlieffen Plan, trench warfare, unrestricted submarine warfare, Woodrow Wilson, which we'll talk more about next time too, rationing, and propaganda. Next up, you're going to watch U14-L3, Basics of World War I, Part 3. If you have any questions, comments, or want to learn more, let us know. We're happy to help out. Thanks for watching. Bye.